Hey, John here from John's Do-It-Yourself. A friend of mine asked me the other day at work if I could build an Air Force shadowbox. Now I've built 3 Navy shadowbox up to this point, and I said, why not? I'll give it a shot. Send me a pic of what you want. So she sent me a picture of an Air Force shadowbox, and she said, hey, I want this one. So I take no credit in the design of this, only in its creation. So here's the final product, and now you can step with me through the rest of this video and I'll show you how easy it was to make. I'm going to start by measuring my first piece at 11 inches, and before I make any cuts, ensure that my saw is square. We start by cutting our base hexagon. After I cut my first piece, I will use it as a guide to the other 5 sides. The key to ensure you have the exact size with all 7 pieces for your base is to shave off a little of your guide piece as you make your cut. Now onto the angles. This is where people get confused. A hexagon is 720 degrees. Divide that by 6 sides and you get 120, with each corner having 60-degree angles. Each piece will need to share half that, so divide by 2. So now set your table saw to 30, and that will give you the proper cut. As you can see, I don't like to do a lot of measuring, so I cut my first piece and use it as a guide. This ensures no matter what the measurement is, all my pieces are exactly the same size. Okay, lay your pieces out and mark them 1 through 6. First, cut pieces 3, 4, and 5. Cut them the same width as your stock piece. Take the smaller pieces now that you have and set the distance to cut the groove that will allow the plexiglass to slide in. Now your 3 bottom pieces should be shorter than pieces 1, 2, and 6, but your groove should be aligned. Now taking piece 2 and 6, we will cut off 3 inches and notch at a 45-degree angle. Use any of the smaller base pieces to set your saw. I also make a cheater's mark to stop before I cut too far into the piece below where I can't see. Once those pieces are cut, I take a straight edge and mark the rest of the distance I need to cut. Here I use a coping saw to give me that very small, fine finishing cut. Okay, Curtis, using my dado blade, I cut the inside of all 6 pieces. I cut half the width and 1/4 inch deep so the back plate lays flush. Now we are going to join the top pieces of your hexagon, pieces 1, 2, and 6. Since these pieces will be supporting the weight of the box when complete, I am going to use a plate joiner and ensure these joints have a very strong bond. So with some wood glue and some size 10 biscuits, I fasten pieces 1, 2, and 6 together. Once the biscuits get wet from the glue, they slowly absorb the glue and expand, creating an extremely tight bond. I usually clamp both pieces down to the workbench and allow them to dry. Now I will start the eagle faceplate. Since I don't have a piece of oak large enough for the entire logo, I will cut 3 pieces and join them together. This part is optional, but I ran the pieces through the planer to ensure they would all be the same width. This would also lessen my sanding time. I arranged the 3 pieces where I knew my logo would fit and the grain of the wood most closely resembled each other, and I marked them for the plate joiner. The same as before, apply the glue, insert the biscuits, and then clamp it very tight together. I place a clamp on both sides to ensure the boards do not have a bow when applying pressure. Squeeze hard until you see glue come out of all of the seams. While the face plate is drying, you can move on to cut the plexiglass for the base piece. I laid the base piece down on the plexiglass and traced the outside perimeter with a Sharpie. You are missing the inside perimeter due to the dado cut. I simply took off a ½ inch on each side and then made my cuts. Remember that your base piece should still be in 2 pieces, so clamp it down if you need it to stay still. Now that my faceplate boards are dry, I draw my logo on the faceplate with a pencil and take it to the table saw to cut it out. Cut the easy long lines and leave the smaller cuts to a jigsaw. This way you will not have to worry about cutting too far on the underside of the faceplate. Once all your angles are cut, I take it to the sanding board for a thorough sanding. I hit the edges to give it a beveled look. Leave no sharp edges. Taking a piece of mahogany wood, I set my table saw to cut off 2/8 of an inch. The piece that we will be cutting off will be the piece that we use. Using the leftover mahogany as a straight edge, I draw the logo on the faceplate with pencil. Draw your lines all the way across each time so you can ensure the rest of the logo is straight and even. Then go back and erase the lines that are not needed. Once your logo is completely drawn, you can go back and simply cut the pieces of mahogany to fit. Work on one side only, and then use the pieces that you have already cut as a template for the other side. Simply lay one piece on the other and then trace the perimeter and make your cuts. Remember to keep in mind which side you want facing out based on the texture and wood grain of the mahogany. Looking at my center circle, I simply pick the corresponding saw hole size to cut out the center. Lay all your pieces out and take one final look to ensure you do not have to make any more cut adjustments before you paint your mahogany. I did sand the pieces before painting with some fine grit sandpaper, but I left all the sharp edges. Use a very light coat on the mahogany and allow it to soak up the paint so you can see the wood grain through the paint. Now, while the paint is drying, you can go cut the back plate. Here I will use a 1/4 inch piece of plywood. So before we apply the Air Force logo to the faceplate, we will stain it and the rest of the box as well. Seeing how dark the blue came out on the logo pieces, I knew I would have to choose a darker stain than I usually do. So I chose this time American Chestnut. As you can see, I always apply my stain with paper towels. I feel this gives me better control over how much I am applying, and it minimizes any streaks that may occur. It also allows you to get into tight gaps without applying too much stain, and at the same time you can wipe up any extra stain that you've left on the wood. So now you're almost done. Lay your faceplate on your base to see how it looks so far. I think that the contrast is great, and I love the way the grain is showing through. We still need to make the flag housing for inside the box. Start by making a line while the faceplate is still on the base, so you can get a feel for how much of the flag you want showing. Now, keep your flag housing below that mark. Start by cutting the width of the boards. They should be below the plexiglass groove and even with the dado cut. Cut your top angle and leave the bottom length uncut for now. We will make sure we have enough length and the right angle once we get the top angle joined. These two pieces were too small to use the plate joiner, so I simply glued them together and allowed to dry. After they dried, I cut them to fit and stained. Once the stain dried, I glued the pieces in place and allowed them to set for a few hours. To make sure I had the exact position, I put a few scraps of the plexiglass into the grooves to ensure that the boards would not slip and block the groove. Now to apply the logo to the faceplate. The pieces marked here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, will not be applied just yet. We will only be working on the others, and we'll probably save the circle for last. Use a straight edge to align your pieces. Apply your glue with a small brush so you can spread it out very thin. Too much glue here will cause too much cleanup, and you don't want your faceplate to have any rough looking spots. Place each piece into position and clamp down. Make sure your pieces don't slide or move when applying the clamps. Always double check your spacing after each clamp is applied. To this point, we have not joined the top half and the bottom half of the shadow box. They should still be in separate pieces. If you did this, there is no possible way to get your plexiglass in. So, now take the plexiglass and strip off the plastic protection from the bottom side only. This will have to be done in order to get the plastic protection past the flag housing. You can squeeze it tight and apply a little wood glue here if you feel you need to. But once we mount the faceplate, those pieces aren't going anywhere. Here is the reason we did not apply all of the logo pieces. Remove pieces 1, 2, 3, and 4 and take a small drill bit and drill a pilot hole for your screws to mount the faceplate directly to the box. If you did not glue your top and bottom box pieces together, just ensure they are snug and tight before drilling the pilot hole. After the pilot hole is drilled, I am going to use a small bit that will give me a countersink for the top of the screw. The screw must be below the surface, so when applying the last pieces of your logo, there will be no obstruction. After applying your 4 screws, you can now attach the rest of your logo pieces. Using the same process as before, apply a thin application of glue and clamp down. Alignment is everything here. So while that is drying, we can work on the interior of the box. Take a basic measurement of the back plate and cut your foam board to give you a little excess. As always, I use foam boards bought from Michael's Arts and Crafts. This stuff works great when mounting the ribbons and medals that have pins. The last time I was at Michael's, they had a sale on the foam board. It was $1 a sheet. The only problem was that these sheets were thin and somewhat warped, not the normal ones I use, but I figured I could resolve this problem. I did this by cutting the boards in half and gluing the 2 pieces together. Glue the bows against each other, not in the same direction. This will quickly remedy the bow once the pieces dry. You can avoid this problem altogether by purchasing a thick piece that is not bowed like this knucklehead did. So after a few hours, the glue dries and you can see that you are back to a piece of foam board that is straight and will work great. Using your back plate and a straight edge, make your marks and take them to the table saw. For the bottom angled piece that houses the flag, you will either need to use a jigsaw or a bandsaw. A table saw will cut too far into the bottom of the piece and could cause problems later. I chose a bandsaw, well, simply because I have one. Take the piece to the back plate and ensure it fits within the lines. Then lay your felt over the hole and press your foam board into the bottom of the box. This will double check your fit. On my first attempt, I am slightly off near the flag housing, so I will take 1/8 of an inch off here and then recheck. On my second attempt, I have a nice snug fit all the way around the perimeter. So, now with some wood glue, I apply a healthy coat to the top of the back plate and attach my foam board. Once I'm sure I have it within the lines and just where it needs to be, I clamp it down to make sure I have a nice solid bond. After a few hours, I come back and remove my clamps. Now here I change out the glue from wood glue to simple Elmer's school glue. Apply a healthy coat and spread out thinly with a straight edge. It is important that you have no lumps of glue, so make sure you spread it out evenly. Then simply lay your felt down and smooth into place. Now cut off the excess felt, leaving enough to cover the sides. Here I am going to try something new. I am going to apply the glue onto the sides and then press down with bobby pins to ensure that the contact on the sides remains between the felt and the glue. There are other options like taking a straight edge and pushing it flush up against the side and clamping down, but I thought I would try this way and see my results. After you have completed that, you can allow it to dry and start working on putting your flag in the flag housing. I am going to cut a piece of leftover foam board from an earlier project. You can use thin plywood, the plexiglass, or the foam board, it doesn't matter. This is only to place behind the first layer of the flag so it stays flat and shows no ripples. The back of the flag housing was not exactly a triangle, so this helped me out immensely once I figured out that a normal flag folding would not work in this shaped box. After your felt has dried, you can cut away the excess felt. Simply take an X-Acto knife and slide it under the foam if possible and cut away the excess. The last step is to pre-drill your pilot holes and attach the back plate to the box. I countersink these holes as well so the screws lay flush. Remove the top plexiglass plastic protection and your box is done. All you need now is the contents. So, let me know how I did. I would love to hear your comments and ways I can improve. And remember, go Navy.